Hello and welcome to Business Line. This week's regional elections in Spain have tested the voters' mood, and the results were a verdict on the country's prime minister and his economic strategy. And this verdict was clearly economically motivated. Several years of austerity have built up a strong background for young alternative parties who promised to put an end to austerity and corruption and stand for people's interests. In 6 months from now, Spain holds general elections. While campaigning, the country's prime minister said by that time the economy will be growing at 3% and 500,000 jobs will have been created. But people gave their votes to those who protected them during the worst times, like the new mayor of Barcelona.
The new mayor of the second largest city in Spain, anti-poverty activist Ada Colau, has described her success in regional and municipal elections as like David beating Goliath. The Barcelona-born 41-year-old's breakthrough follows years of campaigning against austerity policies. Standing up for citizens at risk of eviction in Spain's mortgage crisis, she wasn't afraid to use the term criminal when addressing the banks. The philosophy graduate, before becoming candidate for mayor, was the main spokesperson for the citizens' platform Barcelona en Comú. As evictions continued, in spite of grassroots protests outside government officials' homes, she was determined to raise the movement to power to bring change. She said, "I believe it's clear that we are ending a cycle, decades of predictable politics whereby a few big parties dominated, and during which voters cast their ballots every 4 years feeling that we really weren't deciding anything." Left-wing Catalan parties born from the waves of Spain's economic crisis channeled people's discontent. Podemos, Iniciativa per Catalunya, EUIA, Eco et Procés Constituent, and Colau's Barcelona en Comú. She said, "We have to change how we do politics, starting with complete openness, so we can know absolutely everything that goes on in administration, everything that was stolen, all the high positions in the civil service controlled by the political parties. All of that must be put in order." Colau's campaigning made direct contact with voters, building on her experience mobilizing citizens to resist established structures. She also appeared with Indignados movement figures fighting inequality and corruption, and former Uruguayan President Pepe Mujica, once an urban guerrilla fighter. Barcelona en Comú's plans include enshrining basic social rights and eliminating political privileges. Our correspondent sums up, many towns and regions in Spain now have new faces of people who never imagined that they would go into politics. Thanks to these elections, the time has come for dialogue and agreements.
To help us understand the local and regional election results in Spain, and particularly in Barcelona and Madrid, Euronews talked to Fernando Vallespín. He is a political science professor and analyst with the Autonomous University in Madrid. Take a look at what he said.
Ada Colau is a symbol of the anti-establishment movements during the toughest times of the crisis. So is Manuela Carmena. They're both capable of gathering around them people who have not necessarily voted along similar lines in the past, but who represent this new sensitivity that we've all seen in Spain since the economic crisis began.
Let's now take a closer look. 6 years into the crisis, the country's economy is finally seeing some decent growth. During the first quarter of the year, Spain's gross domestic product grew by 0.9%. Madrid expects the annual growth to be close to 3%. So why don't people feel the recovery, or why don't they feel it strongly enough to support the government? Well, they're busy looking for jobs. Unemployment is the country's biggest problem. According to Eurostat, it stood at 23% in March. It is less than last year's over 25%, but the country's labour market has not recovered. According to official figures, only 1 in 10 work contracts signed at the beginning of this year were for permanent positions. Moreover, the number of temporary contracts is growing twice as fast as permanent contracts. An interesting fact, between 2008 and 2013, over 3 million jobs disappeared in Spain. According to the polls, that's pretty much the amount of votes the Popular Party has lost from the last local elections 4 years ago. Now from Spain to Poland, where the political situation has also been changed as the country elected a new president.
Serving the public quite literally. Poland's newly elected president, Andrzej Duda, has been celebrating by dishing out coffee on the streets of Warsaw. Victory for the 43-year-old marks the first major electoral win in almost a decade for his opposition Law and Justice Party. One resident asked him about temporary and civil work contracts. These contracts need to be gradually liquidated, he says. I have an agreement on that, which we will implement. Official results for the presidential election are yet to be announced, but outgoing Bronisław Komorowski conceded defeat after an exit poll. I'm very happy. With such a president, I want to live and work in this country. I've seen an elected official thanking people for the first time. This is not my cup of coffee, so to speak. I voted in favour of Bronisław Komorowski, but it turned out this way. This is what people wanted. Komorowski had originally been seen as a shoo-in for another term in office. Duda's win is likely to set alarm bells ringing for the government. It faces its own election race later this year.
We've seen the political changes in Spain and Poland. It's now time to move to the corporate world. Business leaders are not elected, although sometimes hundreds of thousands of people depend on them. This is it. This is IT.
You think inheriting an empire is something that only happens in epic poems? Think again. Here's a man taking over the helm of a technology conglomerate employing 500,000 people. His name is Lee Jae-yong, and he's the heir to the throne of Samsung. 1 year ago, his father, Chairman Lee Gon-hee, had a heart attack and still hasn't recovered. The 46-year-old vice president had to step in and spend the last few months acting as a representative of the giant that generates 17% of South Korea's GDP. In a symbolic move, he was recently appointed chairman of two of the group's most prominent foundations. His leadership style has already started to take hold. He restructured numerous affiliates and sold non-core assets in the chemical and defense sectors. His greatest accomplishment so far has been the company's booming semiconductor business. Samsung has seen a surge in operating profits and is investing $14 billion in a new chip manufacturing plant. His greatest challenge, on the other hand, is represented by slowing smartphone earnings. First data suggests the Galaxy S6, with only 10 million units shipped in the first month, is far from being the iPhone killer the company was hoping for. That was it. That was IT.
And that was it for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.